Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Toronto Jazz Saxophonist Andrew Rathbun. We talked to him in late May 2020 about this new COVID-19 world of no live jazz, but he actually has new music coming out. He talked about this and the entirety of this surreal time on the planet. Enjoy.
So, Andrew, how's life? How's everything going?
You know, it's certainly interesting.
It's something, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've been trying to write a little bit, and the faculty group here has been, kind of doing what everyone else is doing and making these, like, online, videos. So I wrote a bunch of new tunes. Actually, that's what I was doing when I missed your call. I had my headphones on and was trying to mix the latest creations that's coming through the door, so I'm kind of working on that.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
How
about you?
No matter what happens, it's all life after all, and
right.
You got to make a way through it, and you got to find positivity, you got to find silver linings, and you got to do the best you can with what we got. It's bizarre, it's unprecedented, it's something that's happening on the entire globe, so we just got to find a way to, keep our chins up and hope for that light at the end of the tunnel. But you have new material, and I think that's an interesting thing right now during this pandemic for those artists that are releasing material. It has to be bittersweet. You got material coming out where people can probably have latitude to listen to it, but it's something you can't back up live. So talk to me a little bit about your latest project and kind of that idea.
None of us who are putting out records, especially someone like me who's like putting out 2 records within a month of each other in the middle of a pandemic I would highly recommend doing against that if at all possible in the future. And the first one, the Debussy project, we sort of thought like, oh boy, this might not be a good idea, but there was too much inertia. Same for the Rand Blake record. There was just too much inertia to postpone and think about a later date to release either of them in the fall. So we just kind of had to go forge ahead, and so the first challenge is like you can't book anything to support it, which seems to be a big part of getting any traction in terms of press for the record. And then the other thing that we've found is that a lot of publications, since there's so much less advertising and so much less activity, have so much less space. Like, the space was already an issue because of, less people reviewing records, less budgets to pay people to review records, less space, and now there's even less space. So, that's also been an issue that we found, is that, there's just not the same, avenues, to pursue, to get, some people to check it out.
Well, let me ask you this. When this all started, probably around mid to early March, talk to me about what happened in your life where you realized that live jazz was going away and we were hitting this momentous, surreal part of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any crystal balls about quite how bad it would get. So I'm not really sure how to answer that. I mean, I'm just like the rest of us. I was just kind of along for the ride, I suppose. Certainly I have my own ideas about how it's been handled and the way forward and where we should be now versus where we are. And I'm pretty convinced that this is far from over. Like, I think the goodwill of people to stay indoors for 9 weeks has now been exhausted, and there was an opportunity to make some serious strides in terms of testing and contact tracing to allow some, limited openings in areas of the country that aren't hotspots. But I just feel like that's all going to be squandered, and we're going to get into October and, you know, start into round two. So I don't know. I guess I'm cautiously optimistic, but I honestly am severely upset at the impact that it's had and the way that's been handled. I was just reading. Nick Kristof had a great op-ed today about, you know, the first round of stimulus and how other countries have such, you know, much lower unemployment rates than ours, because they just really made a concerted effort to keep people employed, and we just haven't done that, you know. So, you know, especially in the arts, that's just so much worse. I mean, those folks are just so much harder hit, and it's so much more difficult for them to access, you know, unemployment insurance and you know, things to keep them going because they have such non-traditional income streams.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you hope that both musician and fans realize when we actually do get back into a live music setting? What are you still relying some things that we maybe come back refreshed with?
I mean, I just think people are going to be I don't think this is a new idea either. I think people are just going to be so glad to be able to go out and be around other people and, you know, experience live music. There's been so much, you know, artists are creative, so they're gonna find a way. And, you know, there's obviously been a ton of, you know, streaming things online. Like I was watching a little bit of, watched about half an hour, 40 minutes of Judy Silvano and Joe Lovano did a really nice online thing yesterday, kind of like a duo concert, and she was painting a little bit, and, you know, Joe had all the gongs out and whatnot. It was, you know, it was great. But boy, it's so much more of a enriching experience to see that live, you know. So, I think people, you know, after consuming so much online content, are just going to be, when they go and hear the real thing, I'm hoping that they appreciate it that much more. But in order to get to that point, although people crave that, I don't think people are going to be running out to do those things until they feel there's a high degree of safety, which I think, again, back to my first answer, which really wasn't much of an answer to your question, but, you know, that's the X factor. I mean, it's just been handled so poorly. I think there's going to be a long period until people feel safe enough to go and, you know, commingle with large groups of people. So I think that's also a big question. Like, when is that point going to come? And I think that point's even farther off into the future.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, thanks for reaching out with the new material. Thank you for talking about this strange new world. I really appreciate taking some time out today.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Toronto, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Andrew for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.